rather than shoot the shit, I'm going to jump right into it if you're okay with that.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
I
I'm
don't want to
yours.
I don't
I
want to
don't have
miss
to do.
anything
This is
good.
awesome. I don't have to do anything today. I could just sit here and talk. I don't have to prepare. I
Yeah,
love it.
are you a guest often on other people's shows?
Yeah, anytime anybody asks me, I say yeah.
It's fun,
And
isn't
then
it?
I ask them, I said, can I ask you how many downloads you get? And they say, oh, we're up to 70.
Right, okay.
I do them all. I enjoy it.
You guys are killing it. I mean, obviously, it's been ages.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we were the first or one of the first. Maybe Ask About Fly Fishing was before us. I'm not sure. And it was funny because in those days there was like podcast was old tech, and everybody thought, they were around, and everybody thought podcasts were going to disappear because of all this video stuff, right? Facebook and YouTube. And all of a sudden they came back around with a vengeance.
Yeah. So let me roll. Let's get on the record and we'll start.
Okay. Okay.
Tom Rosenbauer. Oh my goodness. This is so long overdue. It's ridiculous at this point.
I've been waiting for you, April.
Well, I think we were going to do it when you were in BC a few years back.
Right. Yeah. And then we couldn't get it together. Oh, I was doing some filming and we had other things that we had to do.
Yeah, and I was so stubborn. I would only do this in person.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously when the world changed and we had a bit of a shutdown and I couldn't just go to people's houses, I started
Well, you
doing them
moving to
online.
Australia kind of limits your in-person people, right?
Yes and no. I mean, I travel so much in America and Canada
Yeah.
anyway, with how much I travel, it worked. But you know what was just as crippling as Australia? It was Canada. Going from Vancouver anywhere is a super hassle. And especially
Uh-huh.
from northern BC, just a
Yeah.
flight from Smithers to Vancouver round trip can go up to 800 bucks
Oh
Canadian.
my God. Wow.
Yeah, and it's
Wow.
funny actually because in a month and a half I'm doing a bit of a circuit. I used to do one every year in Ohio and the PA area. So I'm going back
Hmm.
to New York, Ohio, that sort of general area. And I cannot believe how affordable flights are domestically in the US.
Not that I've seen recently, but I guess I haven't been going to Ohio.
Maybe compared to Canada and Australia, everything seems
Yeah,
reasonable. But yeah, but that's my
maybe.
point. So anyway, yes, it is nice to be able to finally get you online. It's not in the flesh, but it's better than nothing.
Well,
So
I'm happy to be here. I'm
yeah.
very happy to be here.
When did we? No, I won't start there. I was going to say, when did we see each other last? But it would have been in a trade show. I feel like the last time I really saw you in a non-work environment was in Belize.
Yeah, at El Pescador.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I did a podcast with you and Lorianne Murphy there.
Oh, whose show was that?
It was mine.
No, it was not.
Yes, it was.
I've been on your show before.
Yeah.
When was that?
It was a video podcast.
Good
Yeah.
Lord, that would have been years ago.
Oh yeah, it was. Well, I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about all of that. We're
I've
going
been
to
doing it
talk.
so long you forgot you were on it.
I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
think I'm trying to remember all that because you were there fishing with LA, and I think I was doing a do-it-yourself trip. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
I
remember
think you were.
how that all aligned. Maybe she
Yeah,
was
I think
dating
that
Will at the
was
time. Was she
it,
dating
it
Will?
was it, yeah, it was if it wasn't your first, it was one of your first saltwater trips I remember. And you were, soaking it all in and learning about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Oh, because who else was there? Was Aaron Adams there?
Aaron wasn't on that trip, I don't think.
Okay.
I would
Anyway,
have remembered if Aaron was there. He's memorable.
he is, but it goes back a long time, so it's good to see
Yeah.
you again.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you. For people who, first of all, I'm being rude. For people who don't know who you are, Tom Rosenbauer is the host of the extremely popular Orvis Fly-Fishing Podcast. But you're so much more than just a host, and I want to talk about that because you're truly a hardcore angler. And I feel like sometimes, even though everybody knows that, I feel like the podcast can be overshadowing for hosts at times because we start to think of you as an interviewer rather than an angler. And I want to talk about
Uh-huh.
Tom Rosenbauer, the human all round, the
Okay.
multifaceted man. So
Okay.
let's back it all the way up. Start where
I
we
hate
start,
talking
everyone.
about myself,
I know this is so much
but
fun.
all right. I got a glass of wine here.
Yeah, yeah, drink it up. Tom, where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Rochester, New York, about 5 hours from where I live now in Vermont.
Okay.
And then I went to the College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, an hour away from there. And right after I got out of college, I took a job at Orvis and moved to Vermont.
After college?
Yeah.
Wow, not aging you, but that is honestly a long time ago.
Yeah, I wanted to be a fish biologist, but I didn't have enough money to go to grad school, which you really need. So I said, well, I had worked in fly shops, I'd taught fly tying, I'd been a commercial fly tyer when I was a teenager and in college, and I thought, well, I can make a little money and go back to grad school. Well, see where that got me.
I have to ask you when this was.
1976.
Okay, got it. So how did you get into
How
fish?
how long was before you were born? Was that April?
So I was born in 83. So you've been around. Talk to
Yeah.
me about fishing, not fly fishing as such, unless you started fly fishing. How did you get into fishing?
My dad was a bait fisherman, and we used to go and sit along the shores of Lake Ontario and fish for bullheads and white perch and white bass, and the occasional smallmouth or largemouth, which was a big thrill. And then he kind of got into golf, and I kept fishing. I'd never played a game of golf in my life. I kept fishing, and I decided that fly fishing looked interesting, through American Sportsman, Kurt Gowdy and Jack Dennis on American, or Lee Wolf on American Sportsman. So I taught myself back in those days. The books you had available were terrible, both for fly tying and fishing. Of course, there were no videos, no internet. So I struggled through it for a long time. I mean, a really long time, hacked away at it.
Did you have anybody mentoring you or anyone you could turn to physically, not just a book?
Yeah, I had a friend from Boy Scouts who also got into it about the same time I did. And then there was a guy who recently passed away named Carl Coleman who had a fly shop. It was in his garage. It was a little fly shop in Rochester. And I had been tying flies for him because he liked my Catskill dry flies.
Oh.
And yeah, he took me under his wing and I learned a ton from him. I mean, I still use things that he taught me to this day. Yeah, he was a brilliant angler.
Oh, so
Brilliant angler.
I'm totally getting distracted here, and I will come back to the timeline, I promise. But the Catskills, I'd mentioned before we were rolling that I'm going to New York
Yeah,
next month. Well, I guess
yeah,
October, November.
yep.
What do I need to know? Why is the Catskills so special?
Um, you know, there's a special look and feel and smell to the Catskill Rivers that I've never experienced anywhere else. It's just different, and they're fairly large rivers there, for both freestoners and of course tailwaters in the Delaware. And there's so much tradition there,
Yeah.
so much history. I mean, if you read Sparse Greyhackle's book, you should definitely read Sparse Greyhackle's book, Fishing Days, Angling Nights, before you go.
Okay.
And then Austin Francis's Land of Little Rivers. Those are two. And then there's one by Ed Van Putt. I forgot the name of that one, maybe Fishing the Catskills. But a lot of history, ton of history there. And the fishing is great. I mean, I think it's the best fishing in the eastern United States from what I've seen.
Why is it so historical?
Because a lot of as you well know, fly fishermen in those days were old wealthy white guys, right? And a lot of them lived in New York City, and the Catskills was a few hours from New York City, still is a few hours from New York City, and so those wealthy sports would go up and fish the Catskills, and coincidentally, it was really good fishing. It still is. It's one of my favorite places in the world to fish. Still,
And then
um,
why were your flies different? Asking for a friend. I'm selfishly asking what I need to know about when I do pack my fly box.
Oh, just pack your normal stuff. I mean, I use sparkle duns and compare duns and emergers and all that stuff. But the Catskill dry flies, if you want to do it in the traditional way, is dub body or quill body and upright wings made out usually out of wood duck
Okay.
and fairly sparse hackle. And that's cool. But the more modern, the same flies you'd use on the Henry's fork will work better than the most days than the traditional Catskill flies, but they're beautiful. They're kind of the epitome of the dry fly tier's art. So
Yeah. No, I want to have some tradition. Did you ever know Larry Solomon or Lawrence Solomon, I guess, by his book?
I I met him a few times. I used to go down to the Theodore Gordon Fly Fishers had a big annual event outside of New York City, and I met him a couple times down there. Yeah.
Right. So Larry was a very, very good friend of mine, and he always
Uh-huh.
called me his second daughter. So this
Uh-huh.
year, his first daughter and I have arranged a bit of a memorial trip. So we're going to go, and we wanted to meet. We wanted to do it somewhere that Larry really loved. So we decided to do Catskills, but neither of us have a clue what to expect or what it's like. And yeah,
It's
a
not it's
little
not
unsure.
good fall fishing. That
Oh, okay.
you should be aware of that. There are a lot of fish there, and the both branches of the Delaware are tailwaters, but I've never had super good luck in the fall. It's very inconsistent. Now
Yeah, okay.
but probably going to be either streamers or midges.
Oh,
Um,
I wonder how Larry would feel about that. Oh,
yeah.
he'd be all right. He always used to come up to steelhead fish in the fall, so
Yeah.
we managed to find a guide who was friends with Larry, so we'll follow his lead. But this is all
Oh
really
yeah.
good to
Well,
know.
he'll
So
he'll know he'll know better than me. So
cool. Okay, so let's get back to you. So you've got your fly tying when you're little. All right, when you're younger, are you talking about your teens? Were you 7? Approximately how old were you?
I think I started fly fishing when I was like 10 or 11.
Okay.
And then I started tying commercially or selling flies to the shop when I was maybe 13, 14.
Right. That's really young. I didn't realize that you started quite that early. Did your dad pick up
Yeah.
fly fishing or had you kind of ended up
No,
going?
my dad could never, it's funny, he always said he wasn't patient enough and he wasn't a very patient guy, but he'd sit on the bank of the lake and drink beer and fish for bullheads, but he never fly fished.
Okay, got
I
it.
tried to talk him into it, and he just never clicked.
Right. So you continue your fly fishing journey, you graduate high school, you go to college, and you wanted to be a biologist.
Yeah.
Elaborate. Then what happens?
Oh, well, I took as many fisheries courses as I could as an undergraduate in aquatic entomology, and there were. It's funny that the student population, the forestry school was about, I don't know, 2,000 people in those days, and there was not a single fly angler except one teaching assistant in the whole college. These days, there'd be all kinds of fly fishers, which is so cool that you're seeing this on college age kids now really getting into fly fishing. But there was nobody, and I fished. There were streams in the Syracuse area, little limestone streams and spring creeks, and then I'd go down and fish the Catskills on weekends and the Adirondacks. And then I went to the bat and kill a couple times when I was in college, not knowing that someday I would live close to it.
Right. And Orvis, was that I'm assuming Orvis was the place to be at the time in the industry as a fly fisher.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was the place to be. It was, there was Orvis, there was Cortland, there was Scientific Anglers, there was Fenwick, um, Hardy was around then.
Mhm.
Who else? Not many. No, not many other manufacturers or retailers. I mean, LL Bean in those
All
days, I
right.
don't think they have
Yeah.
anything left, but LL Bean sold fly tackle then, and Eddie Bauer at one time sold a lot of fly tackle. But yeah, Orvis was the place, and I would get the Orvis News, which was it was a newsprint publication. It was printed on newsprint, and it was mainly sale items and stuff. And I would get that, and I saw a opening for a job, and I said, "Well, shit. Can I say shit on your podcast?"
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Because I don't do it on my podcast. A lot
Oh
of
my
kids
goodness.
listen.
I edited my other podcast the other night, Into the Backing with Kelly Gallup, and I was
Oh,
doing it in front of my daughter. And she asked me to shut it off. She literally said, "Mom, it's too much swearing. Please shut him off." And I had to,
how old's your daughter now?
she's almost 7.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Wow.
it goes fast, huh?
Yeah,
But
goes
yes,
fast.
you can say shit. Go for it. Relax,
Okay.
make yourself at home.
All right. Okay.
So yes, we shit.
Um,
You're going to take this job. What were they offering? I mean, as far as
oh
the role,
God.
what was not monetarily?
It was
What
a
was the
clerk in the
role?
retail. It was a clerk in the retail store.
Oh, like a sales associate.
Yeah, and I ended up spending more time measuring inseams on pants for pompous people from Greenwich, Connecticut than I did selling fly rods, and I was uh, pretty disillusioned. Um, and they would have fired me if I stayed there. But what happened was we had a fly department at the time, and we had all domestic tires, and we didn't use any imported flies. And there were a group of tires. Renee Harrop was one. Dennis Black was one, and there were probably 15 of them spread across the country, and somebody had to manage them. And the guy that was running that, and we also did our own fly materials. We dyed bucktails and imported necks from capes from India and fumigated them. Anyway, the guy that was doing that left for another company, and I was the only warm body in the company that knew anything about fly tying. So they moved me down into the fly department, and I was a wet-nosed kid with no experience in managing or anything. And I didn't last too long there
Why?
because because I was terrible at it.
Okay.
But I met a lot of cool people and I enjoyed it. Um, met had a started a lifelong relationship with Renee and Bonnie and Doug Gibson, who's still out at Three Rivers Ranch in Idaho. And yeah, they stuck me in the fishing school. They figured I couldn't get into too much trouble there, and I became a fishing school instructor. And I guess I settled down a little bit uh, doing that. That was a good place for me. Fishing and shooting schools, teaching shotgun shooting.
Oh, I didn't know
Um,
that. I knew about the
yeah,
fishing school, but I didn't know about the guns.
yeah, yeah. And then Perkins, who was the son of the then owner and president, he was editing the Orvis News, that same publication that I got the saw the job in, and he said, I'm going to he was either going to San Francisco to open the first non-Vermont Orvis store or the UK. I can't remember which one, because he did open the UK operation. And he said, can you edit the Orvis News for me? And I said, yeah, for what, a couple weeks? And he said, no, for good. I'm going somewhere else. So I did that for number of years and started to turn it into more of an editorial publication. I had no writing experience, and started right. I should look up some of my old pieces. I'm sure they'd be cringeworthy. Um, and luckily, at that time, Fly Rod and Reel and Fly Fisherman and Country Journal were in the area, in the immediate area. And then there were a number of writers like Jeff Norman and Tony Atwell and Bob Jones. And these guys all took me under their wing, and I'd hang around their offices and they'd critique my writing and help me out with it. They were super generous. Um, so I took, I kind of taught myself how to write, at least how to write instruction manuals and stuff like that. Um, and Nick Lyons noticed my writing and asked me to do a book for him. That was the Orvis Fly Fishing Guide in 1984, which is, I think it's the best-selling fly fishing book in history. Um, Still in print, numerous revisions, but it's
Yeah.
still in print. And Nick really gave me and I don't know if you know Nick, but he's a wonderful, warm, generous, kind human being. And he, gave me my start in writing.
Oh, was everything under the Orvis umbrella? Did you ever feel like you needed to break free for your own safety in case something were to fall through?
No, I wasn't smart enough to have a life plan. I just kind of fell into things and let things happen to me. I still don't have a plan on what I'm going to do when I grow up. So,
Are you
um,
are you the longest time staff or employee of
yeah,
Orvis?
I am. It'll be 50 years next June. And for a while, there were some people in the rod shop that had been there longer making rods than I had been there, but they've all retired since. So I am the longest tenured, probably the oldest in the company right now. Um, but I don't have any plans to retire.
Is the Perkins family still involved?
Yeah, they still own it, lock, stock, and barrel. Simon, the third generation of Perkins, is the current president.
Got it. Okay. This is
Yeah,
so cool. What about the
yeah.
podcast? How did that start?
Yeah. Well, there was a guy named Jamie Hathaway who was running our social media, and at the time, nobody really knew what social media was, but Perk was president at the time, and Perk was very perceptive. I remember him saying things like, "If you think this internet thing is going to go away, you're fucking crazy," and he said we need to be in this social media space, and so he hired Jamie Hathaway, local guy. And Jamie came to me one day and said, you should do a podcast. And I said, no, no. I said, at the time, I said, it's old tech. This was what, 12, 13 years ago, 14 years ago. I don't know. I said, it's old tech, and fly fishing is so visual. Why why would we do a podcast? And he said, come on, just try it. Just do it. So I did a few, with no guest, just me talking about whatever, some aspect of how to fly fishing. And it started to take off.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. And so that,
It's the most popular fly fishing podcast in the world.
I think so.
From
I don't
my
know. You might
numbers,
be, you might be close. You
mm,
might be close.
yeah, no, you're still, I was looking at it the other day. You're rocking it. I mean,
Well, I
always
do.
have
I
been.
do want a week. I do want a week now. Before when I was doing analysis and putting together the Orvis Learning Center, and really had a lot of other irons in the fire. I would do maybe one a month or two a month, but
Mhm.
since my job has changed to more of a spokesperson, after COVID, I moved my office to my home. I'm able to do them once a week. So,
Yeah, I'm
um,
thinking about doing that. Right now it's every 2 weeks.
uh-huh.
But the problem now is that there are just so many people that I'm interested in speaking with
Yeah.
that I've actually got this major backlog of all these. I need to do more. I think I might go to one a week.
Yeah, people say to me, don't you run out of ideas for the podcast? And I said, what are you, crazy? I mean, there's so many interesting people in fly fishing, and every week, I'll read a book or something. I'll see somebody online, and I'll say, oh, that'd be a cool guest.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
yeah,
the more that
you
you
never
do,
you're
the
never
more
gonna
that it
run out of
grows. No, especially
never
because
gonna run out of ideas.
when you speak to someone, then you learn about someone through them, and
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, it just goes on and
yeah,
on. I keep
yeah.
waiting to get bored of this industry and life, but it's just not. It's not happening.
I've never been bored with it.
I see it. Um,
I've never been bored with fishing or the industry.
I have a question for you
Yeah.
about Orvis.
Uh-huh.
Orvis endorsed lodges. I'd actually I'd never heard of it until I started working on the Dean, oh, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. And I
Yeah.
had seen that they were an Orvis endorsed lodge, and I thought, what the hell is that? What
Yeah.
is an Orvis endorsed lodge, and is that still happening?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's bigger than ever. Lee Perkins and a guy named Vern Bressler, who owned or ran a excuse me, ran a lodge in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Great guy, one of the finest people I've ever met. Um, Decided that, if we're gonna sell this stuff to people, we need to give them a place to go and use it, and we need to vet these places because there's a bunch of fishing lodges and guides around, but we want to send our people to places where they're going to have a great experience and they're going to keep fishing, so we can sell them more rods and reels. And so they came up with this idea of Orvis endorsed lodges and outfitters and guides, and how it works is we identify some of them, or they'll come to us, and then they get vetted. We send one of our people out. We have two guys that do this full time to uh, inspect the lodge. They check, the food, the lodging, the safety, the vehicles, the licenses, all that stuff, and the experience. And if they approve of it, then we add them to the program, and they have to pay for it. Um, my original idea that didn't fly was that we wouldn't charge them anything, and it would be more of a marketing thing. But Lee Perkins never did something that wouldn't earn him a buck.
Right.
So- and they get a lot of marketing and advertising out of it. They get catalog exposure and web exposure. So I suppose, and it's worth it for a lot of them, obviously. So
Yeah.
that's how it works.
I remember thinking it was a money grab, and I just thought, you know what? It's actually been years since I've thought about it, but I thought I would ask you here because I think for
Yeah,
mine it was the Blackwell's Lodge, and I just remember looking at the pricing at the time. It didn't make sense, and the steelhead world was kind of going in a tumble. But then I've noticed since then that a lot of the trout lodges and other real reputable lodges have got the Orvis endorsed stamp, and I
yeah.
figured there was something more than just a money grab going on.
Yeah, it's not a money grab at all. It's not super profitable, but again, if you're gonna educate people, you're gonna teach them in your schools or your learning center or whatever. You want them to continue that path, right?
Yeah.
It's just good business sense, and you know, it's good. It feels good. You want them to have a great time after they learn this stuff. So we want to make sure that they go to places where they're going to be treated well.
Yeah, and reputability is more important than ever. It's funny, we've recently launched for our online membership, like a free version, just to offer something of value to people. And in writing, the sales emails and all that fun stuff in a funnel, I really weigh on you can have faith in the people that you're learning from because now more than ever with online access and social media and everyone's an expert, it's hard to really filter out the nonsense and focus on those people and lodges who
Yeah.
are legitimate. And
Yeah.
I wanted
Somebody has to vet it. Somebody has to vet it.
yeah, I wanted to ask you about it because I feel like you've been at the forefront of a lot of this in more ways than you realize. Can we talk a
Uh-huh.
bit about this in the industry and vetting it as such?
Yeah, sure. Whatever you want.
Cool. Where do you draw the line on being a part of the old guard and a gatekeeper? Um, and then, it's versus maybe being there and able to let people in. I was talking about this recently. Who was I on the podcast with? Oh God, I'm drawing a blank. I had this conversation recently about gatekeeping and the old
Oh,
guard.
yeah.
When I got into the industry, I did face a bit of that. And out of respect for the dead, I'll keep a lot of that quiet. But I
Hmm.
was met with old guard issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your experience with that, Tom? Did you have any of that or were you in at the right time?
I think I was in at the right time. I've never considered myself part of the old guard, even though I'm old and I've been around for a long time. I think that I love seeing people getting into fly fishing. I love seeing them make their first cast and catch their first fish. And the old guard people that complain about rivers being too crowded, they're so full of shit because nobody wants to walk. You can go to any river in the country and you can find a place to fish. And there's so much other fishing. I mean, I'm talking about the United States. This country is vast and with vast public resources. And, you can fly fish for all different kinds of species and even trout fishing. If you can easily get a drift boat in a river, it's going to be crowded. But if you're willing to walk above the put in or you're willing to fish a tributary, you're not going to see anybody all day long. Um, I was out in Denver in July on the South Platte, right? The South Platte, it probably considered one of the most crowded rivers in the country, right? So close to Denver, incredible fishing, big
Mhm.
fish,
Big
great
fish.
hatches. So we walked, I don't know, an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours into the canyon, and we saw four other people all day long on the South Platte in the middle of the
Yeah.
summer on a beautiful day. So it's just people are lazy, and people that say that fishing has gotten too crowded just don't want to walk 100 yards.
Yeah.
And I
No.
think it's total bullshit. And the more people we have in this sport, pastime, hobby, whatever you want to call it, the more people they're going to stand up for rivers. It's a cliche, but rivers and clean water, because you really can't be a fly angler without understanding the ecology behind what's going on in a river. And so, there are a lot of rivers that would not have been saved or protected if there hadn't been anglers. And you hear this all the time. It's nothing new, but I firmly believe in it.
Yeah, same. And I remember now, it was Steve Duda. We were talking about gatekeeping, and I had suggested that the young people who can utilize their legs, should start walking. Exactly what you said. Leave a lot of the easily accessed rivers for people who maybe don't have working legs.
Well,
Um,
everybody wants to sit
Move.
in a drift boat now, even
I
young
know.
people.
I
Every
know. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's like I would much. I mean, I do enjoy fishing from a drift boat, especially with a friend, because it's fun and it's social. But man, if I'm on my own, I love walking. I love walking in a river. I love wading. I love getting away from people. I don't fish near people.
Yeah.
Um, I never, unless I'm, in a drift boat. I don't fish near people at all. If I see somebody, I'm around the corner somewhere, and they won't even know I'm there.
I wonder if any of that has to do with how we got into it. Because, like you, I don't want to be around anybody. But also, I started out my fishing journey on foot as a hardcore steelheader.
Yeah,
And that's what we
yeah,
did. If you wanted to find a cool river, you started walking
yeah.
in some dangerous terrain. I wonder if maybe, and again, I'm just throwing this out there, but maybe a lot of the people who like sitting in boats, maybe they got into it from a social aspect. So maybe they associate fishing with the social side of things.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I mean, you go to like you're going to the Catskills, you go to the Beaver Kill. Not the time of year you're going, but it's like, yeah, all the guys will crowd into one pool and they'll yell back and forth and talk and compare notes. And yeah, I guess they enjoy doing it that way, and that's fine. I'm just not going to be there.
Yeah, I
I'm
understand.
gonna go find a riffle somewhere where there's nobody else. Um, and I don't know. It's just fishing is fishing for me. A lot of it's been solitary.
Yeah, I totally agree. But when I
Now
was
there,
talking,
there's
go ahead.
certain fishing that I enjoy fishing with another person. Carp fishing or tarpon fishing. Um, saltwater in general, except for bone fishing. I'd rather be on my own bone fishing. But there's certain times when it is fun to be with a friend, but not somebody who you don't know.
Why do you think carp and tarpon? You've got
I don't know.
my brain ticking a
I
bit.
don't know. It's so visual, I guess, and it's it's just as interesting being the observer as being the angler.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually a really
But
good
I don't
point.
know. I don't know. That's just it's me. I don't examine things too closely, April.
Fair enough.
I never have.
Well, it's funny that you said that you're the old. I don't see you as an old guy, although I guess technically maybe I should, but I don't because you've always had this real youthful energy about you. And I think when I think of you, you've always been so welcoming. You've always, for me personally, I've never felt blocked out. Even when I was going through a lot of the stuff with the old guard, I never felt that from you. And I know others have not felt that from you. You're generally pretty loved all across the board.
Well,
And
that's really nice to hear.
you bet. And I'm not just, what does my husband call it? Slug slurping? It's so awful. But I really mean it. And when I had mentioned earlier the old guard and gatekeeping, I was actually referencing the industry. And as somebody who really does hold the key in a lot of ways, what are your thoughts on gatekeeping in the industry nowadays? What's Orvis doing to try to open the door and make people feel more included?
Oh God. Well, Orvis is very very socially aware and welcoming, and we started the 50-50 on the water with women, and we're involved with brown folks fishing, and we have tried really hard to be as inclusive as we can. um it's just the way to be, right?
If you weren't there, I'd raise my eyebrow and go, mm-hmm. But because
Yeah,
you're
no,
there,
it's
I feel
it's
like it's
true.
authentic.
Simon Perkins totally believes in that. He's the president and he totally believes in it. Um, I mean, it's good business too,
Yeah.
but it's not. I don't think we totally do it because it's good business. I think it's because we're just a welcoming, inclusive company.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. What
And
about
I
you?
love I love seeing, people of different sizes and shapes and colors and nationalities fly fishing. I think it's so cool. It's so exciting seeing that.
I was not going down this route, sitting down, but we're just again, there's nothing scripted. We're just kind of flying by the seats of our pants here. But
Go ahead. You can bring up any subject you want.
why
I
did
don't care.
it take so freaking long? Why did it take so long? I don't want to spend too much
Yeah.
time on inclusion because you can find it anywhere right now, but why did it
Right.
take so long?
Well, I think that fly fishing is kind of a traditional way of fishing, and I think it just took time. I think we had to move some of those old guys. We had to convince them. Um, I just think things don't happen quickly in fly fishing, right? It's not. Although Euro nymphing came on pretty quickly because it's so damn effective. But I think a lot of people were too impatient. A lot of women, I think, were too impatient. And my view was, give it time, it'll happen. It's just gonna take a while. This is kind of a traditional uh pastime. And
Yeah.
it did. It's happening now, and it's so exciting. I think it's the most exciting time in my career in fly fishing, seeing the diversity and the inclusivity in fly fishing. It's really cool.
Well, I was going to ask you kind of around that. I was going to ask you the biggest changes that you've seen in your, oh my goodness, 50 years. In your 50 years, not necessarily as far as demographic, but gear, mindsets, techniques.
Um, Lots of things. Euro nymphing, which we touched on, tenkara,
Mhm.
two-handed fishing, which,
Yep.
was at one time was really restricted to Scandinavians and British that fished in Scandinavia. Um, that's changed a lot. I think that information flow obviously has just gone crazy.
Mhm.
And there are no secrets anymore. There are no secret rivers, unfortunately. Now there's a few, but they're small, right? You can't put a drift boat in any of the you can't put a drift boat in any of the secret rivers that are left because they've been found.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the information flow. I was doing a podcast with Barry Ord Clark this morning, and we were talking about, when we started fly tying. I mean, you had to know somebody if you wanted to learn how to tie flies. The books were lousy. The pictures were lousy. The books were lousy. The instructions were lousy. And now anybody can learn how to tie flies by going onto YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Um,
Wait, did you have
that's
VHS tapes? I remember I learned on a VHS tape on a machine that on a VCR that we did not have a remote for. So I'd have to go pause it, rewind,
no,
do it
April. When I
again.
started, there was no
No
such thing as a
tapes?
VHS tape.
Oh
No,
my
there were books
goodness.
and TV shows, network TV shows. That was it.
Why were the books so bad? Surely they knew how to do diagrams.
Um, well, I think that maybe fly tyers weren't very good photographers in those days. You know, the equipment was fairly expensive, and the halftones. I mean, it was all black and white,
Yeah.
right? The halftone technology was pretty bad. They were pretty lousy halftones, and I don't know. I mean, Dave Whitlock was a great artist, and you know, when his book, he could really illustrate something beautifully,
Yeah.
and you know, his books really, I think, up the quality of the illustrations.
God. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, they were just lousy.
Is there anything that's happened in fly fishing that you would like to put back? What did Kirk say the other night? Put the toothpaste back in the tube. Anything that you'd stop or change if you could go back?
Uh, Drift boats.
Okay, that's fair.
Especially on the Delaware, which I dearly love. I remember seeing the first drift boat on the Delaware River. I mean, it used to be if you walked in a mile, because the river is in some places is pretty inaccessible, especially the main stem of the Delaware. And if you walked a mile, you were going to have that giant pool to yourself all day long. And I saw my first drift boat. I knew the guy who had the drift boat. And I looked at him and I said, "This
Kidding.
is the beginning of the end."
Do you do a lot of drift boating?
I do when I'm hosting trips. You know, I've been doing a lot more trip hosting these days, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy meeting new people and enjoy showing them areas. And when I'm on a hosted trip, I will, you know, some of the places are mainly float fishing. But if I have a day off on my
Yeah.
own, I'm going wading.
Yep. Yep. I understand that. You've
Yeah.
been around the world, Tom. What's your favorite spot or place that you've been so far
I never answer that question because it's usually wherever I am.
at the time?
I mean, last week it would have been fishing for bluegills on Lake Champlain, and then Sunday it would have been fishing for smallmouth bass, sipping rusty spinners on the Connecticut River, and then, you know, last February it would have been fishing in Chile. Um, so it's kind of wherever I am.
Yeah, I guess so much of it depends on our mental state or the stage in our lives. But is there somewhere in your life that you've always felt like you have to escape back to?
Um, Well, recently, Patagonia has become a very special place to me because it's a lot of wade fishing. And it's like, you know, they say it's like Montana was 50, 75, 100 years ago. You don't see any people on the river, very few people on the river. And the trout are pretty stupid for the most part,
Yep.
um, and not very spooky, and you know, it's a wonderful place. I still love the Bahamas bone fishing. Um, you know, it's a really pristine environment. The Bahamian government has been really, really careful to protect their ecosystem. And you know, there's all sizes of bonefish there. It's not just little fish and not just big fish. It's a good healthy mix of fish, and there's tarpon and permit too. So those are two places, you know, other than my little streams that are 5 minutes from my house, that are special to me, I guess.
Yeah.
But you know, there's so many. Like I still love the Madison River, even though it gets horribly crowded. I fish it in October and November. It's not so bad. I still love the Madison. I still love the South Platte. You know, and there's a few other rivers that I won't mention on the air
Good
because they're
idea.
not terribly crowded right yet.
Yeah, let's leave it at that.
But
Um,
yeah, it's and there's so much. I mean, I just, you know, I went to I went to Dallas to do presentations at four of the Orvis stores in I think it was March, and I had a ball carp fishing in the middle of Dallas. I mean, I loved it. I don't think I caught one, but it was, we had some targets and it was cool. So, wherever I am,
Yeah.
you can always find something interesting.
Yeah. Hey, did you have kids?
Yeah, I have a daughter that's 37 and two grandsons with her, and then I have a son who still lives at home, is 19.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Two
That was
two separate broods.
Gotcha. That's just me being nosy. Was it hard to? Oh, that's me being really nosy. I'm going to ask anyway because you've got to
No, it's
drink.
okay.
As soon as I see the wine come out, I'm like, you know what? We're relaxed. Did you? So, have you had a hard time keeping a marriage down as a professional fly fisher? And before you answer that, because I don't want to get too personal, I want to speak broadly. A large amount of my listening base, I found out recently, is divorced. And
Yeah.
you just mentioned the two broods thing. Um,
Hmm.
do you have any insight to that for people listening who might be struggling right now? Because I've watched a few close friends and it's really hard.
Well, my wife is one of the most delightful and understanding human beings in the world. And when we got married, I said, look, or before we got married, I said, look, I'm going to fish a lot. It's not going to change. Don't think that marriage is going to change this. I am going to continue to fish a lot. And if you can't handle that, we can't do this. It's my life, and it's going to be my life, and she's been incredibly understanding over the years, over 23 years.
Do you
Like
think
when
that
I go fishing with my buddy Sean Combs, I shouldn't poor Sean Combs. He has an unfortunate name right
he
now.
does right
He's
now?
a
Oh dear.
he's a rod designer. He's a rod designer for Orvis. And when we go fishing, my wife never asks me, when are you going to be home? Because she knows I don't know and it could be late. So she never even asked me. I'm lucky and I can see fly fishing can consume people. And you know how it gets. It's really obsessive.
Oh, I
And
couldn't be married to someone who didn't fish.
I
There's
can
no
see
way.
why so many people get divorced.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult. You have to be lucky. You have to pick the right person. You have to be lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might cut that out. I haven't decided yet.
It's fine. It's fine.
But yeah, off the record, it's unbelievable. A lot of our mutual friends and just people going through absolute shit out there. It's bad.
Yeah. Because of fishing, do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. It's so much deeper than that, but maybe.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
you hear one side, you hear another. But anyway,
Yeah.
back on the record. Um, I would like to ask you some questions about your podcast.
Okay.
So,
Sure.
do you ever feel bound by professionalism?
Do I ever feel bound by professionalism?
Gagged, stifled, muzzled, quieted, silenced?
Well, in a certain way, I do because when I'm fishing, I swear like a sailor, and I'm very careful on the podcast not to swear. In fact, I did my most exciting podcast with Tom McGuane, and I had to do a lot of bleeping.
Right.
Um, because I kids come up to me all the time and say, "Oh, I love your podcast," and I listen to it. A lot of kids listen to it, so I'm careful about that. So I guess I feel, what'd you say, muzzled or
Yeah. Muzzled.
um,
All of the above.
yeah. And I listen to other podcasters, not fishing. I don't listen to any fishing podcasts, but I listen to other professional podcasters to kind of get a sense for, I'll say I'll be listening to one and I'll say, oh, I like the way he did that. I like the way he asked that. I'm gonna try to use that. Um, so I guess, yeah. But then again, I'm always myself in a podcast, and I let the conversations ramble just like you do, right?
Hmm.
Because people enjoy that. People like that when you go off on a tangent. Um, so I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I haven't felt like you're too off brand, like what I've seen in person or, off the podcast. I feel like you're pretty on
Hmm.
brand, but every once in a while I do wonder, I listened to your podcast of yours the other day with Dr. Doug Thompson.
Uh-huh.
Because yesterday we
Oh,
recorded Into the Backing
yeah.
and we sat down with Kirk Dieter, Tom By, Dr. Doug, or Dr. Thompson, and Bob Mallard.
Oh,
Yeah, it was good. So we were able to have that conversation. It'll be out October 15th.
oh.
And
So you
I,
had Dieter and Bob Mallard together.
yes, it was, well, you have to listen to the podcast. But I had listened to your
Whoa.
episode with Dr. Thompson because I wanted to get some insight on him, and
Yeah.
I really enjoyed listening to you, but there was a part of me that wondered, does Tom want to just like take his jacket off, sit down and dive all in and get really stuck into this, but he can't because it says Orvis on the, podcast thumbnail.
Yeah, nobody at Orville's listens to my podcast, so I pretty much say whatever I want.
Right. Yeah, okay. I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, and I was really sympathetic. When I did that podcast with Doug Thompson, I was not unsympathetic at all. I think he had a lot of good points.
I thought you both did fantastic. I thought it was an excellent episode and actually strongly encourage anyone to go and listen. Did you get feedback? I know you were preparing for the worst. Did it happen?
No, it's so funny. I get some feedback, but I get very little feedback, and it's interesting. And you probably see this too. But you put something up on YouTube, and you get all these snarky, nasty comments, but I never get them in the podcast mailbox because they're not anonymous. I know who they are. I've got their email address, and I hardly ever get nasty or criticizing emails. I get a few that criticize the sound quality sometimes on the podcast, so I'm always cognizant of that, and I always listen to them. Then I had a guy who was hearing impaired and was upset that I didn't have transcripts, and so we added transcripts to the podcast. But yeah, I don't get many nasty ones. It's interesting.
Is there anybody that we've lost over the years who you really wish that you'd had a chance to sit down with to share their story or hear more about their story?
Yeah, there's a number of people. Jim Harrison, who I knew, but I could never talk into getting on a podcast, would have been fascinating. Um, it would have been off the rails, but it would have been fun.
Why did he say no? I've had a few of those. They'll say, "Come on over for lunch and we'll talk," but I don't want to go on the air.
Oh, I don't know, he just didn't feel like it or didn't want to do it.
Yeah. Anyone
And
else?
then, and Peter Matheson, who I knew and fished with a number of times. Peter Peter, he wasn't interested in being on a podcast, so um, that was unfortunate. And then, well, Lefty, I never had Lefty on a podcast, and Lefty and I were good friends, and I should have had Lefty on a podcast.
Yeah, that one surprises me. I thought for sure.
Yeah, well, Lefty didn't like Orvis. Lefty had a he liked a lot of the people at Orvis, but he had an issue with Orvis because Orvis fired somebody he was close to at one time, and so he never forgot it.
Right. Got it. Makes sense. Have you had anyone on the show where you've just been absolutely gobsmacked or any real favorites?
Yeah, Tom McGuane for sure,
Obviously, he's great.
and then John McPhee, the writer John McPhee, who is my absolute favorite nonfiction writer of all times. Having John on the show was really cool, and he was really fun. So yeah, I was gobsmacked. There's probably some other ones too. I can't remember. There's been other ones that, But those two in particular were two people that I had always wanted to have on the podcast, and I did. So
Do you find yourself drawn to writers and philosophers and people who can make you think? At some point, taking a break from talking about five weights and dry flies and
yeah,
techniques?
yeah, yeah. Writers and musicians, creative people. I've had a couple of musicians on the podcast, um, and they're always fun. They approach fly fishing kind of from a different angle, so that's
Yeah.
been fun.
Are you a musician?
No, I love music, but I'm absolutely not personally a musician, but I do listen to a lot of music. We go to a lot of live concerts together,
There's a lot of
my
musicians
family.
in fishing, and
Yeah.
we've wondered why before. Why do you
I
think
don't
that
know.
is? I've always assumed I'm also quite musical, and I've always assumed it was rhythm, maybe, but and just the way that you break things down in your mind. But as someone who's not a musician,
Yeah.
can you see from the outside looking in what might be the parallels between musicians and fly fishers?
I think it's the thoughtfulness and the introspection that and the focus, the concentration that you need in fly fishing, maybe.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I'm not sure. You'd have to ask a musician, really.
I've asked all of them, and none of us can quite figure out what it is. There's
Yeah.
something, but we
Yeah.
don't know. But just the common factor.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it is.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I know you've just had a pretty jarring message, and I don't want to abuse my time here with you, but I do have
That's
to
no,
ask.
that's okay. That's okay. Do what you need to do, April.
Okay. My other show is called Into the Backing, and that was the
Hmm.
one where we sat down. The one with Kelly Gallup was about check nymphing and, if it's actually fly fishing. And then the one yesterday was about wild fish and introduced fish. But I'm always asking my guests now at the end of our interview what they would like to see discussed on Into the Backing. Is there a subject that you find quite controversial that you would really like to see various viewpoints tackle?
Yeah, I mean the native versus introduced fish, which you've done.
Mhm.
Another topic is the idea that we can engineer fixes to trout streams, which I've covered with a number of hydrologists and biologists before, but I think it's something that is fascinating to me, and I think it's worth it's worth pursuing.
Yeah, that's a good one. I might look into that. I found yesterday that what it comes down to in a lot of ways is just specific regions. It's so hard to do it as a broad topic or to discuss it as a broad topic.
I think you can though. I think you can because it's a universal issue. It's a universal issue. And I think you can. I think you can do it as a broad topic.
Yeah, we did it as a broad topic, but I can also
Mhm.
see, as we were discussing, I could see 12 other episodes unfolding. I won't do that to everyone listening, but there's
Yeah,
so many ways that you can go. There's so many different rabbit holes and rivers that you can go down with it.
yeah, yeah. True. Um, the whole. I think the whole catch and release. I'm a c- I'm a catch and release angler, so I'm a conservationist. I'm up on my high horse um, is a good controversial one.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Are you a hunter? You would be.
Yeah,
Birds,
yeah,
right?
yep.
Do you hunt everything?
I hunt mainly birds, turkeys, ducks, grouse, woodcock.
See, I'm a late hunter. I think you've been doing
Hmm.
it decades longer than I have.
Uh-huh.
But it changed a lot of my stance on conservation. It changed a lot of my stance on being on a high horse with catch and release. I actually
Yeah.
feel like a bit of an asshole catching and releasing now, to be honest.
Yeah, people get really out of control about that, and I think that yeah, we should respect the fish and we should get them in quickly and let them go. But it's a blood sport, and you're going to kill some fish, um, and it's going to happen. And as long as you're not irresponsible about it, it's going to happen. And I think people don't people. I mean, yes, sometimes anglers kill fish. People don't realize how resilient trout are. I mean, I just had the stream in my backyard electroshocked right the other day. The state comes in every year, every other year, and on my property and electroshocks. It's all wild fish, browns and rainbows. And they first they shock the fish, right? And then they take them out and they dump them in a bucket and they leave them in this bucket with a bunch of other fish. And then they eventually transfer them to a holding cage that's in the stream. And then they take them out and they dump clove oil to knock them out in a bucket. And the fish are kind of like flopping upside down and stuff. And then they take them out and they lay them on a ruler and measure each one, and then they put them on a scale, and then they put them back in the bucket, and then they put them back in the holding tank, and a couple hours later they release them into the stream. And I go down the day after and look for dead fish.
And
And and I know that if fish die, there's not much current right now in the river, and if I mishandle a fish, I'm going to kill it. If I gill hook it or something, and it'll sit there on the bottom for a few days. And I got down the day after, and there was not a single dead fish in the river, not one. So I think it's interesting. It's interesting that we need to be more careful about releasing fish, but they're a little bit more hardy than we think they are. We might as well do everything we can, and I think we should stop fishing at 68 degrees for trout and all the other things. But um, people go to extremes.
in which way?
Just about handling fish. If you put a picture of a trout out of the water, you're gonna get all these social media uh, trolls attacking you.
Yep. It's true. What's Orvis is it's funny because in podcasting someone from Patagonia the other day, obviously you can really feel that they're very passionate about fish always being in the water. And
Yeah,
myself, look, I'm not perfect. They go up, they go down. I get excited. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes they go back in. Sometimes I lift them up for my daughter to see. It's across the board. But what about you at Orvis? Do you feel or do you guys have any protocol with that, like Patagonia does?
yeah. We try not to uh, use pictures of fish out of the water in our own stuff if we can. And we keep them in the water. I think they look better when they're in the water, anyways.
They do,
Grip and
but
grins are horrible.
but does it work? I mean, even though the companies are showing the fish in the water, is it actually encouraging people to keep the fish in the water? Is it like a seeding thing? Are we slowly seeding this into people's
I
minds
think
or
so. Yeah,
okay.
I think so. It's leading by example, and I think that it helps.
What's next as far as leading by example from companies in fly fishing? I feel like so much has happened over the last 5 years. Is there anything else that can be improved that you guys are looking
I
at?
think showing more diversity. I mean, people, brown people and black people need to see people like them, and women need to see people like them on the water enjoying fly fishing. And I
Mhm.
think that we still need to see more diversity portrayed in the industry.
Yeah, I totally agree with that actually, having just come from ICAST. One more thing that I was never going to ask you, but I am going to just take a shot and ask you anyway.
Go ahead, April. Go ahead.
Okay. And again, because I understand the handcuffs of business and jobs and companies, but how does Orvis, how do you, as a professional, handle the whole political thing? You know, you see the go woke, go broke. You see people talking about elections, especially right now. Here we are in September. Does Orvis have a stance on that? Is there a place for political conversation in fly fishing companies, or should that be sought elsewhere?
Personally, I don't believe, unless it's an environmental threat, I don't believe that fly fishing companies should get involved in social issues or political issues. I really don't. I mean, Pebble Mine, that was sort of political, and the Everglades, that was sort of political. But and Orvis has gone at times gone beyond what I would have uh, I would have stuck my neck out on in social media personally.
Mhm.
I really don't think it has a place. But yeah, it's a tricky one. But yeah, just don't. I mean, when I have hosted trips, when I do hosted trips, I sit them down the first night at dinner and I say, okay, there's one rule here for the next week. We're not going to talk politics.
Yeah. Does it work?
Yeah,
Oh, good.
pretty
Okay.
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah.
So what's next for you, Tom Rosenbauer?
I don't know.
Are you going to be there
Um,
forever? Are you going to go somewhere else? What is your story moving forward? Where can
well,
we
I'm going to
see you?
stay in. I don't want to retire because, why should I? I'm having fun, right?
That's right.
I think that doing more educational stuff, doing more hosted trips. I didn't think I would enjoy hosting trips because I'm too selfish about my fishing. I love to fish and I fish all the time and I love it. Um, but I do enjoy hosting and I never thought I would. Because I'm too selfish about my fishing. But I do enjoy hosting trips, and I've had some great times and met some wonderful people on these trips. I've been lucky. I haven't had any real jerks. Well, there was one, but I want to do more of that.
Yeah. Where can people find this information? Is this on the Orvis site?
Yeah, the hosted trips are listed on the Orvis site.
Okay,
The,
so
the ones that are with me are listed on the Orvis site. Yeah.
I would love to read a book by you. Not a technique book, but a book with you, with your voice, your thoughts, your experiences, your stories.
Yeah, I've always avoided that
Why?
because they don't sell very well.
But it's a legacy. I mean, it would be you've got children, everything changes with kids. You could pass it. I mean, I'm writing a book and I don't even know if I'm going to publish it. It's going to go to her and she can read it. But what about you? Don't you want to put it somewhere?
Every time I read one of those navel gazing fly fishing books, I grit my teeth. Um, unless it's a really good writer, and most of them aren't. And I don't like those books. I really don't. I
What's a
mean,
navel gazing book? Someone who's too busy looking down at
oh,
themselves.
people are talking about their inner thoughts when they're fishing. I don't give a shit about somebody's inner thoughts when they're fishing. You tell me a story. I mean, John Garrett's good about, John Garrett and Tom McGuane, they're good about telling stories about
Yeah.
things that happen. I don't want to know what your inner thoughts are when you're fishing. I could care less.
But your story, see, I actually do care about your inner thoughts to some degree if I can relate to them. But for you though, I want to hear about your stories. Have you thought about putting any of those down?
Um, well, I did a book with Brian Grossenbacher recently called Trout,
Okay.
and I did some stories in there, but they weren't my inner thoughts or anything. But they were more essays and stories.
Okay.
I
Your
don't know. It's
inner
not my
thoughts.
thing, you know. I mean, I'm a writer of glorified instruction manuals, April, and that's what I do.
What's your zodiac sign, if you don't mind me asking?
Take a guess.
Uh, I don't know. Aquarius.
Taurus.
Okay. Yeah, right. That's fair.
So that's kind
That
of
makes sense. I can
Taurus
see
is
it.
kind of like linear and right.
But you get shit done.
I try. Yeah, I try.
Yeah. But you know what? I don't want that to take away from you because I feel like you're quite reflective. I just feel like you're aware enough that you don't feel like you need to project it out on the world.
Yeah, I don't really want to know somebody else's inner thoughts and I don't really want them to know my inner thoughts, you
Yeah,
know.
that's totally fair.
And really the experience of fly fishing, what goes on in your mind is really too hard to, in my opinion, is too hard to put into words
Yeah.
unless you're Tom McGuane.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, maybe that's why you appreciate interviewing
And
writers.
and Tom McGuane is great of a writer. He doesn't talk about his inner thoughts when he's fly fishing. He tells great stories.
Yeah, I think it almost always comes to. I'd never heard the term navel gazers, even though that seems real perverse to me. I just see something totally different. But um, yeah, stories is where I'm at. I'm thinking stories, not inner thoughts. I've got enough trying to balance my own and my own family's inner thoughts, let alone someone
Yeah, right.
else's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you enjoy your evening. I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me. Thank you.
Well, it's been really fun, April, and I hope to get to see you in person at some point in the future.